Halloween. Today, we're going to be ranking some of my favorite parasites because I feel like people just don't appreciate the horrible things in the world enough. And we're going to start the list off with one of my favorites, Giardia lambila. They're adorable little stingray-looking dudes, and you ingest them through contaminated water or contaminated food, just anything that's been contaminated with poop, which has Giardia cysts in it, and they live in your intestines, and they make you poop a whole lot, and that's just what they do. Giardia are relatively not that dangerous, especially compared to some of the other stuff here on this list. They usually go away on their own within a couple of weeks, but in some extreme cases, they can be pretty dangerous because diarrhea itself can be a dangerous condition, especially if you lack proper hydration, sanitization, medical care, so on and so forth. So you definitely don't want to get these guys, but I just think they're adorable. They got little suction cup faces, and those aren't eyes there on them, but they look like little eyes. I just think they're neat. You know, I'm going to put them in A tier. Next up is tapeworms. Now, when I'm talking about tapeworms in like an academic context, unless we're being really, really specific, usually I'll just hear the word cestodes because there are over 5,000 species of tapeworms, and Cestoda is the class, the taxonomic class that encompasses all of them. So if you just throw out tapeworm, it's kind of hard to say, well, you're talking about human tapeworms, you're talking about pork tapeworms, you're talking about this tapeworm, that one. But if you just talk about cestodes, you're just talking about tapeworms. It's kind of easy. What's crazy about tapeworms is that they have this head called a scolex, which is wreathed with hooks and suckers so that they can easily attach themselves to your intestinal wall. Like, you can't just pull these things out. And then the rest of its body is segmented into these little sections called proglottids. And each proglottid has a complete hermaphroditic reproductive system. So depending on the species of worm, each proglottid can produce anywhere between hundreds and tens of thousands of eggs, and every single worm, again, depending on the species, can be anywhere between hundreds to thousands of proglottids long. So you've got this enormous animal living in your intestines, and when you go to the bathroom, you're laying potentially hundreds of thousands of eggs for this thing. And that's wild to think about. Two fun facts about tapeworms. Number one, there are several species of tapeworms that live in fish, like, for example, Pacific salmon, and therefore are transmitted to people who eat raw or undercooked fish, like sushi, for example. And this is a research paper from 2009 that was published in a journal called Emerging Infectious Diseases on a genus of tapeworms associated with Pacific salmon, and they reference this traditional Japanese artwork of a tapeworm being removed from a man's anus. And I have been showing that painting to every class that I've taught about parasites for years. And fun fact number two, the longest tapeworm ever recorded being removed from a person was 82 feet long. That's 5 giraffes stacked one on top of the other. C for cestodes. Ticks are arachnoid parasites that are rarely more than a mere annoyance by themselves. The main issue with ticks is that they carry viruses and bacteria that are injected directly into your bloodstream when they bite you. That's the real problem with ticks. Common tick-borne illnesses that you do not want to contract are Lyme disease, which I've had a couple of times, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, tularemia, anaplasmosis. And the biggest problem when people get ticks is that they'll try to grab them by the body to pull them out, but their mouth parts are serrated like a kitchen knife. They hook backwards, kind of like fishing barbs, and they lock into your skin. So if you try to pull on their body when you remove them, there's a good chance that you're just going to rip their heads off and leave all or part of their head in your skin. And that can cause a lot of infections. So make sure to grab the tick as close as you possibly can to your skin when you remove it. You do not want Rocky Mountain spotted fever. C tier. They're not that crazy on their own, and they come with a lot of unwanted hitchhikers. Trichinella spiralis, the pork worm. This guy is why you want your pork chops thoroughly cooked. This little dude lives in the muscles of pigs in its encysted form. Lots of parasites can insist, and that's not insisting like demanding something. It's insisting like becoming a cyst. And what that means is they're entering a dormant state that can withstand dehydration or living outside of the body of the animal that they're parasitizing. For example, we talked about Giardia earlier. Those encyst just before you poop them out, so that way the cysts are what come out in your feces, and then they wake up whenever somebody else ingests them. And the same thing happens here with Trichinella. They stay in their cyst form until they get eaten, and then the gastric acid in your stomach releases them from the cyst stage, and then they burrow into your small intestine, lay eggs. Those eggs attach into new worms, and then those new worms burrow into your muscle tissue all over your body and create new cysts in the hopes that you too will be undercooked and eaten someday. In the wild, these guys cycled through predators and scavengers, bears and mice and pigs and whatever else, but they're also largely a domesticated parasite. They infect our food source here, and so they can infect us as a result. So always cook your pork. C tier. Plasmodium. These atrocious little dudes are the ones that cause malaria. There are over 200 species of Plasmodium out there, but there's only a handful of them that cause like most of the cases of malaria in humans across the world. The most deadly of which being Plasmodium falciparum, which is kind of funny because there is one called Plasmodium malariae, which is relatively pretty mild. What I think is particularly terrifying about malaria is that you get it from a mosquito bite, and then the parasite travels to your liver, where it starts dividing inside your liver cells. And at that stage, the disease is asymptomatic. Symptoms only start about 2 weeks after you've been infected, because that's when it's done with your liver and it moves out into your bloodstream and starts dividing in your red blood cells. And that is what causes pretty much all of the symptoms and ultimately the death associated with this disease. So your liver's already been eaten up, and now you're losing red blood cells fast, and those are the things that carry oxygen throughout your body, so you're going to get very, very sick very, very quickly. Early symptoms include headache, fever, chills. You assume that you've just got the flu because it's been like 2 weeks since you were around these dangerous mosquitoes, and that's when you're really in trouble because Plasmodium falciparum infection can progress from a mild illness to a severe illness to death in under 24 hours. And this is the one that really got me thinking when I was first starting to study this stuff. I was a new biologist in the middle of school trying to figure out what was what, and these guys just shook me to my core. They're protozoans, so they already defy our definitions of the classifications of life. And also, they're responsible for the deaths of countless billions of people throughout history. But they're not trying to hurt anyone. They don't even have brains. They're just living within their niche. They're doing what they have to do to survive. And their niche, their survival strategy, happens to involve your liver and your red blood cells. They're doing what they evolved to do, which is to reproduce in the warm comfort of an erythrocyte. And they can't even help the fact that they're getting slurped up and spit out by a mosquito. They're just going where they're taken. Thinking about malaria helped me to decentralize humans from the biological narrative and to take any sort of intentionality out of ecology or evolution, and to realize that these little dudes have just as much of a right to live as I do. Which is no right, and also every right at the same time. I could talk about the philosophy of biology for a long time, and that lecture would start and end with malaria. Absolutely S tier. Widespread, heartless, thought-provoking. I think they're terrible, and they fascinate me because of it. Ask yourself, have you ever seen a person, especially a child, with a rash of itchy, pimple-like bumps on their bodies, especially on their wrists, elbows, knees, and ankles? Then they just might have had scabies. Sarcoptes scabii, commonly known as scabies, is a species of mites that make their home in your skin. They are very contagious, and their burrowing causes tons of itching, but they dig their burrows at 90-degree angles, so you can't scratch them out. You have to get a medication that you put pretty much everywhere from your chin down and leave it on for several hours to kill all of the mites and all of their eggs to try to cure this. Scabies are awful, and they're not particularly interesting to me, but there is one distinction about parasites like this that I think is really, really fun, and it really changes the way people think about them, and that is that when you have mites burrowing into your skin, that is not an infection. That is an infestation. You are infested with scabies, not infected by them. And that little change of verbiage just makes this whole thing jump off the page for me. So wild, dude. Doesn't take them out of D tier, though. Botflies! There are a ton of species of botflies that parasitize different animals. If you really want to see something truly horrific, look up botflies that are parasitizing squirrels. But this one in particular, Dermatoma hominins, is the one that parasitizes humans. And contrary to popular belief, they don't actually lay their eggs on people or inject their eggs into people or any of the other stuff that people think about them. It's actually way cooler than that. What they do is they capture a mosquito and they lay their eggs on the mosquito's abdomen. And then when the mosquito bites a person, the change in temperature from the mosquito laying on your skin triggers the eggs to hatch, and then the new larvae crawl into the pores of your skin or into the hole that the mosquito just produced, and that is where they grow. And you can see that these larvae just have spikes that grow all over their body, so they're super hard to pull out. And so they just sit in your skin and munch and feed on you for a few weeks. And then once they're big enough, they push themselves out of your skin and fall to the ground where they pupate and turn into an adult fly. And just like with scabies, it's not so much what they are that gets me, it's the language. These are fly larvae. The word for that is maggots. These are maggots that live in your skin, and that sentence can either be a hideous thing or an awesome thing. Here, with the botflies, it's a Lovecraftian nightmare. But medically, maggot therapy is actually super cool. If you have an open wound that you need to keep clean, you can put maggots in there. They're specially raised medical grade maggots that are sometimes applied to open wounds because maggots only eat dead tissue. So it actually cleans the wound and prevents bacterial growth. How cool is that? Botflies are super fun to think about, not as fun to deal with. B tier. This one's schistosoma. These guys live in freshwater snails, and when humans wade into the water, they emerge from the snail and then they burrow into your feet, where they then crawl up and start living in your intestines. And that's about all I know about them. Not sure why I put them on this list. Boring. D tier. Next up, we got fleas. Well, I mean, like, we don't got fleas. There's fleas here. I don't know, maybe you got fleas. There's actually a ton of different species of fleas all around the world. The most common ones that you'll encounter are the ones that infest dogs and cats. But there is one species called the human flea, which it also has a wide range of hosts. It doesn't just infect humans, but whatever. Their scientific name is Pulex irritans, which I always remember because it sounds like irritans. And they're the ones that carry a bacteria called Yersinia pestis, and that is what caused the Black Plague, which killed millions and millions of people across Eurasia. Plague comes in two forms. It was originally bubonic when it was transmitted by fleas or by blood contact, but then it mutated and it became pneumonic, which means it lives in the lungs, and it was spread through respiratory droplets. And once the plague became airborne, it was a nightmare. The death rate skyrocketed to darn near 100%. It spread way faster. Truly, truly, genuinely terrifying. And it's still around today. It's way, way, way more treatable because of modern antibiotics, but there's still a handful of cases around the world here and there, including here in the US, because prairie dogs carry it, so we still get it here, especially in the American Southwest, New Mexico, Arizona, and such. Anyway, fleas are just crazy little dudes. They're annoying, they're iconic, they're the bugs that you love to hate, and they're also kind of scary because they help wipe out an unbelievable amount of people in Europe and Asia. So I'm putting them in B tier. Wuchereria bancrofti. These are nematodes, and they get into your body through a mosquito bite, and they live in your lymphatic system. And they cause a condition called lymphatic filariasis, otherwise known as elephantiasis, which is where these roundworms cause massive damage to your lymphatic vessels, which leads to a buildup of fluid, which distorts your lower extremities. It is a painful, disfiguring, and sometimes disabling disease. And to make matters worse, it's often accompanied with a tremendous amount of social stigma. The cool news is, while this used to affect hundreds of millions of people worldwide, thanks to things like preventative chemotherapy, which is a wild thing to think about on its own, those numbers are down by like well over 70%. A tier. As far as parasitic disease is concerned, there's few things that are more easily recognizable and spark more morbid fascination than elephantiasis. Loa loa, otherwise known as the African eye worm. These guys get into your body through fly bites, and then they live in your blood and your lungs and under your skin, and occasionally they crawl across the conjunctiva of your eyes and then dive right back down to live inside your body. What's truly crazy about these things is that in most cases, most people who are infected with these worms don't have any symptoms. They might see the occasional eye wiggler, but that's really it. In extreme cases, these guys can cause itching, muscle pain, and even sometimes be visible wiggling underneath your skin. Now, there is another eye worm that is much, much worse, and it's actually already on this list right here. This is Onchocerca vulgaris. This is the one that actually penetrates the globe of the eye and causes what's commonly known as river blindness. These guys are super freaky, dude. Eye worms in general, Loa loa specifically, you guys go in A tier. There's a visceral horror associated with those ones. Enterobus vermicularis, these guys are pinworms. You get them the same way you get lots of other worms, by ingesting their eggs, then they move through your digestive tract, they go to your rectum, where they then crawl out of your anus and lay their eggs all around your butthole, and then crawl right back in. These guys are most common in kids who don't know how to properly wash their hands, especially after they use the bathroom. The worms crawling in and out causes a lot of itching, and so kids will scratch their butt and get the eggs under their fingernails, and then they touch stuff. They touch somebody's food, they touch the top of a soda can, they come and touch your face. Somehow or another, those eggs from their butt get into the mouth of somebody else, and that starts the whole process all over again. This one's definitely one of the grosser ones on the list. Like, Giardia is also spread by putting something in your mouth that's been contaminated by infected poop, but the fact that pinworm infections predominantly involve children just makes the whole thing 100 times worse, because children are awful. You hear that? If you have a child, or if you are a child, or if you've ever been a child, you're gross. D tier. And speaking of poop, look, it's Entamoeba histolytica. So far on this list, we've had worms, we've had bugs, we've had protozoans, but this one is an amoeba, and you'll never guess how you get it. You put something in your mouth that's been contaminated by infected poop, and you end up ingesting some cysts. Entamoeba histolytica is a lot like pinworms, except that it's not a worm and it's completely different. Once it's inside of you, it can cause an extreme form of diarrhea called amoebic dysentery, where you literally poop yourself to death. Amoebic dysentery has a very high mortality rate if left untreated, but modern treatments bring that mortality rate down to about 1%. The trick is just knowing how to spot the cysts in a stool sample, which I am not very good at, which is one of the many reasons why I am not a poop doctor. C tier. This one's called guinea worm. This is a nematode like the one that causes elephantitis, but rather than building up in your lymphatic system, it moves down to the surface of your skin near your feet, and it forms a blister which bursts whenever it touches water, so that this worm can just dump all of its eggs out into the water in hopes that someone else will swallow them while drinking. And you can see here how people get it out without medication. You burst the blister, and then the worm's hanging out, so you tie the end of the worm around a matchstick, and then you just turn that matchstick really slowly, just a little bit once a day, because you don't want to break the worm. It's really, really long and it's really, really fragile. So you just twist it up around that matchstick every single day until eventually it comes out. It's absolutely wild. The coolest part about this parasite is that it's almost extinct right now because of us. Just like smallpox was the first viral infection to be eradicated by humans, guinea worm is about to be the first parasitic infection to be eradicated by humans, and that's all thanks to personal filtration systems like life straws and stuff. Filtering water stops this disease from spreading, and so as we continue to bring filtration and sanitization to humans all around the world, diseases like this just can't survive. Cases of guinea worm have fallen from 3.5 million in the 1980s to 15 in 2021. Not 15 million, 15. Such a cool advancement for humanity, dude. Get wrecked, guinea worm. D tier. Toxocara. These are the ones that infect dogs and cats. They're commonly called roundworms, and there's actually 2 species of them. Toxocara canis is the one that infects dogs, and what do you think the one that infects cats is called? That's right, it's Toxocara cati. Oh, I'm sorry, did you guess Toxocara felis? Because it's an objectively better name that anyone would have guessed? Yeah, me too. No, you're wrong, it's Toxocara cati. Why? But what makes them interesting to me is that neither one of them just parasitizes dogs and or cats. They can be easily picked up by what's called a paratenic host, which is an unintentional but non-problematic intermediate host, like pretty much any animal that eats dog or cat poop, or that might be around dog or cat poop, or might accidentally touch and consume some dog or cat poop, like, like rabbits or ducks or, oh, I don't know, humans that let these filthy beasts into their houses where they smear their buttholes all over the furniture and rely on you to clean up their waste, and which lick their own anuses and then lick your face, and you think it's cute? And once they're in your body, they can wiggle their way into your organs, like your lungs or your liver or your brain. That's called visceral larval migrans. Or they can burrow into your eyes. That's called ocular larval migrans. Or through dermal larval migrans, they can wiggle up into your skin, causing worm-shaped lesions that are commonly known as creeping eruptions. Wash your hands. C tier. I feel like earlier on I should have mentioned that tapeworms can also migrate throughout your body, especially like your lungs and your liver and sometimes even your brain. And they form what's called a hydatid cyst, which is just a fluid-filled sac, this perfect orb of worm that they live in to be safe from the external environment of everything that isn't your intestines. And you can look up here on YouTube videos of hydatid cyst removal. There's videos of what's called the doweling technique, which I always thought was really cool. Because the cyst isn't attached to anything, you can just flush it with water and it'll like float out. And so there's videos of people opening up somebody's skull and you see this massive white orb in their brain and they just pump water underneath it until it just bloop, flops right out. And then they just have this perfectly spherical cavity in their brain, which used to be a worm. It's crazy, y'all. Not gonna stop me from eating sushi, though. This is called leishmania. When I was studying in a parasitology lab in my undergrad, I saw these guys for the first time on a blood smear, and I didn't understand what I was seeing. It just looked like a regular blood smear, except like fuzzy or like staticky almost. And then I zoomed in a bunch more, and I realized that there were about 50 of these guys around every single blood cell. So that wasn't static that I was seeing, it was them. There's a few different species of these that cause a few different forms of the disease known as leishmaniasis. Cutaneous leishmaniasis is the most common form. It presents as these big, painful lesions all over your skin, these ulcers that can leave lifelong scars. Then there's visceral leishmaniasis, which attacks the internal organs, and if left untreated is fatal in like 95% of cases. And even if you cure it, it can leave you with a secondary condition called post-Kala-Azar dermal leishmaniasis, which presents as these nodules that cover all of your skin, especially your face. And then there's my favorite species, which is called Leishmania brasiliensis, and that guy lives in South America, and that's the one that causes mucocutaneous leishmaniasis, which is where the parasite destroys the mucous membranes in your nose, mouth, and throat. Don't look it up. And the scariest thing about this genus is that they stay dormant in your bloodstream for a long time. You visit South America on vacation, you get bitten by a sandfly, which are smaller than mosquitoes, and most people don't even notice they ever got bitten. You don't think anything of it, you go right on back home, and then like 7 years later, the bottom half of your face just starts rotting off. Don't look it up. S tier. Absolutely horrifying, truly revolting, shocking to see, shocking to think about. S tier for sure. And last but certainly not least, we've got your friends, Demodex follicularum longus. Demodex are mites, just like the Sarcoptes mites that cause scabies, but they live in hair follicles instead of under your skin. And specifically, these mites live in the follicles of your eyelashes. Eyelash mites! Isn't that fun? Other species of Demodex infest other animals like dogs or cats, and they can get out of control, and then you get what's called Demodectic mange, or you can also get Sarcoptic mange with the Sarcoptes mites. Even the ones that parasitize humans can sometimes get a little bit out of hand, and they cause like a rash across your face, but generally speaking, they're completely harmless. They're just a few tenths of a millimeter in size. They only live for about 14 days, and 99.999% of the time, you will never even know that they're there. And trust me, they are there. You have them. Okay, well, you might not have them, but the vast, vast majority of people do have them, and the chances of getting them go up every single year. By the time you reach about age 70, that chance is 100%. So if you don't have them by some chance, you will very soon. And look at their long little butts. Oh, I think they're adorable. And they're gonna be your traveling companions whether you like them or not. They're great little dudes. They eat your excess skin oils and dead skin cells in your eyelash follicles to keep your eyelashes clean. They're doing you a favor, and they're so cute. And if you're lucky to live long enough, you're gonna get to know them. So S tier. These are like my favorite ones on this whole list. I love them. So those are a few of my favorite parasites. Feel free to agree or disagree down in the comments, or let me know what some of your favorite parasites are, because if you're into biology, you're bound to have at least one or two. And if you like learning cool stuff about cool stuff, I encourage you to check out the sponsor of today's video, Brilliant. Brilliant is an everyday learning app that allows you to learn real math and science through fun, interactive, and low-stress lessons that you can complete in just a few minutes a day. And they're offering my subscribers a 30-day free trial plus 20% off an annual subscription to Brilliant Premium, and all you gotta do to get it is go to brilliant.org/ForrestValkai. Brilliant adds new lessons every single month, so there's always new stuff to learn. Personally, I recommend their scientific thinking lessons. They're a great way to train your brain to understand the physical world beyond the boundaries of your limited intuition. And if you don't think that human intuition is massively limited, you need to take the scientific thinking course. So head on over to brilliant.org/Forrest Valkai and give it a try. Remember, you get 30 days free plus 20% off an annual subscription when you use my link. So try it out, and if you like it, enjoy the discount. And if you don't like it, cancel within the 30-day free period. It's a win-win-win-win-win situation. I also want to say that apparently you guys really like anteaters and emojis because the channel membership is growing very fast. The vast majority of you are on the lowest tier, which is just fine. Thank you very much. One person is on the $10 tier, which is very generous. I really appreciate that. And one of you crazy motherfuckers is on the $500 tier. Why? I added that as a joke. The good news is, for every 25 of you that joins, I get to add another emoji. So if you want more emojis, all you gotta do is join. And the more of you that join, the more emojis there will be to use. If you like emojis and making poor financial decisions, please consider becoming a channel member. And if you like not emojis, but other perks, then go to Patreon. And with that, I'm Forrest Valkai. Thank you so much for watching, liking, commenting, subscribing, and all the other stuff you do here on YouTube. Please exit to the gift shop on your way out, pick up one of these sweet t-shirts. Have an awesome rest of your day. Don't forget your bug spray, and never stop learning. Bye-bye.